I am going to teach you how to avoid the 10 biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to trimming outdoors, filling in the nail holes properly, and getting a perfect job with the caulking. And stick around for the last one. This is one that has personally burned me at least a dozen times. First mistake here gets people derailed before you even get started, and that is pulling out the old nails. A lot of people just grab a hammer and they start pounding them in. The problem here is you're probably going to do 1 pound too many and damage the finished edge, and 50% of these nails are just going to bend over because they're super thin. Now you can try the claw of your hammer here. That is probably likely going to just slip right off because these nails don't have much of a head. What most pros are going to use is side cutters. This can be a little bit tricky because you have to get the pressure just right, and it is pretty easy to start damaging the edge. You can also just accidentally cut it off, and then you have a little bit of a stub. Then you go in there with your hammer, and the next thing you know, you've made a mess. The best tool for the job by far is going to be one of these little 8-inch pry bars. It's got a beautiful, smooth little roundness to it. It has this great little bit here where you can hook on to almost anything, even a 23 gauge pin nail. It will hook on there onto those small heads. And if they don't come all the way out, you may be able to just grab onto that and pull the last little bit out. Also the perfect tool to scrape off this old caulking. Give this a quick sand with some 150 grit sandpaper, just to smooth it over. Mistake number 2 is sloppy reveals. Now there is no bigger way to make your work look amateur than to have these reveals all over the place. You need a nice consistent 1/4 inch reveal to make everything look proper. Now let me show you how the pros get this done. We are going to use a reveal block. Now you can make these on a table saw. They're a little bit dangerous, I'm not going to lie here. The easier way is to get one of these plastic trim buddies. I will link all of the tools down in the description. If you want to pick one of these up, I think they're like $8 or something like that off Amazon. So take your trim buddy reveal marker, pop it in the corner, and it is as easy as that. And I like to put a couple down the sides just to make sure that as I'm going along, that reveal is going to stay perfectly consistent. And we'll work our way across with a couple on the header. Trust me on this one, every finishing carpenter that comes over to your house, the first thing that he's going to pick up on is bad reveals. Now we're going to get to the important stuff like cutting in a couple of minutes, but first we need to get accurate measurements. A lot of people overlook this step. Now because this is a closet door opening, it may not be perfect 90s, so we're gonna give that a quick check. All right, that one looks pretty good. I'll mark it down as a 45-degree cut. Come over to here, give this a check. Uh-oh, this one's a little bit off. It's gonna be more than 90 degrees. I'm gonna estimate 91 degrees. We'll write that up here. Now I'm going to cut a couple of scrap template pieces. You're going to need to cut those 44.5, believe it or not. This is one of the most misunderstood things about miter saws. Now the way that that works is, let's say you set your saw to 10 degrees, you're cutting off 10 degrees, and the piece that you're left with, your finished piece, is going to be 80 degrees. So for this example here, we have 91 degrees in here. In order to cut the pieces, we cut them 44.5 on the miter saw, and then the pieces are left with 45.5. They add together to give us that 91 degrees. And let's check to see how they line up. We're just gonna go right to the edge here because it's gonna be easier to see if the angle is correct. So line up that edge all the way. It might be a hair off because you can actually see here that there is still a little bit of a gap, which means that I might have cut the angle a little too big. Now, if you're just starting off, you can recut the angle. In this case here, you would want to bring that down a fraction, which means you're gonna cut it like 44 3/4 degrees. In my case, I'm just going to guesstimate and we're going to hope for the best. Let's see if that works out a little later on in the video. So I'm going to mark that down at 44 3/4. To measure the header, I'm just going to measure from inside to inside here, and then we'll add on the reveal, and that works out to be 59 3/16. We will write that up top so we don't forget. Now we'll quickly measure out the sides. Now here I'm going to be adding in some laminate flooring, so we're going to run these past and we'll trim them off when we're installing the flooring. And I can actually just hook onto the bottom of the jamb here. So I'm going to mark those out, and if you want to err on the side of being a little bit longer, go 80 5/16. Write that down so we don't forget. And then the last thing, so we don't end up wasting a bunch of money and cutting the pieces wrong, is to make yourself a little map, drawing on a rough shape, and then we're gonna write in the measurements and the angles. Now, mistake number 4 is a terrible miter saw setup. And this is gonna hit home for any carpenter out there that has helped their friend. You head on over there and they've just got their saw sitting on the ground. There's nothing to support any of the materials. It's hard to get perfect cuts and it's dangerous. So at the very least, just get yourself a cheap stand if you're going to be doing any kind of trim work at your home. This is a $70 special off Amazon. I will link it down in the description. If you want to get fancy, you can add some plywood wings, not necessary. And this is going to make it so much easier to mark the pieces and get perfect cuts every time. And let me give you one more pro tip here for this header piece. In order to get the perfect measurement, if you don't have the plywood here, you can just bring the short point over to the edge of your miter saw. If you do have the plywood though, just slide that right to the edge, line it up with the 90-degree angle here, short point to the 90, then you can hook your tape right on there, and it's super easy to get that measurement. Reference your little block here so you don't mess things up. 59 3/16, and I'm cutting the 44 3/4 degree angle on that one. Start the mark on the top and then transfer it right to the edge of the casing. A little X and a little angle swipe, and I'm gonna write the angle right on top there. And then with these cuts, I like to do what's called an approach cut. I'll roughly line it up so that I'm not gonna be cutting the line off. I'll make an initial cut, and then I'll just tweak this thing over until I'm cutting off the entire line. And now you remember when I did that guessing game with the angles, we're gonna find out if that is actually gonna work or if I've made a huge mistake. And that brings me to mistake number 5, and that is gluing the miters in place. The problem with that is because all these surfaces are never flush or never in one plane, it's almost impossible to get a perfect miter in place. I'm going to show you a bit of a controversial method. We're going to glue these things together down on the floor. And now if you're wondering just how hard this method is to do, we're gonna see what happens when complete novice cameraman Aaron attempts to do the second miter. Wow, those are the hands of a 3-month-old baby. He's doing the practice fit. Now that is critical. If you don't do the practice fit, you're likely gonna mess things up. You wanna make sure nothing's in the way and your hands know what they're gonna do. Applying the glue beautifully, tilting it up on edge, that makes it so much simpler. All right, he's messing up here. You need to lift that piece a little higher and spray the activator from below. He's just spraying it all over the face. It's not going to ruin things, but it's not ideal. Okay, he's got the finger. The index finger is critical to hold the tips together. That's looking good. The thumb's coming in to make sure that top is flush. Taking a little while to pivot, but it's okay. He's got the pivot. The lower thumb is flushing up the lower bit. Now he's squeezing everything tight. All right, putting on the white wood filler. You might as well when this is down on the ground. Using the putty knife to clean out the 90s. This might not be horrible. And then once you get that last miter filled, you can just pick this frame up straight away. You want to be a little careful here. You don't want to be jarring the legs around. Pick it up from the middle, pop it into place. Let's check out cameraman Aaron's Mitre. Wow, that might be nicer than my Mitre. We don't know. Let's not talk about it too much more. And that brings us to mistake number 6, and that's starting your nailing in the wrong place. Now, when it comes to nailing on your trim, where you start makes all the difference. For these here, you want to get this thing lined up with the reveals with one nail on each side. It doesn't have to be bang on, but we're just pretty close. We'll put one there. And now this is the mistake here, is before you start adjusting this onto your reveals, you have to secure this miter area here. Otherwise, you're going to start tweaking this thing and this can absolutely snap apart. And now that we've got that locked in place, you can easily take the bottom leg here and just flex it right and cover up that reveal line. This is the angle that I guesstimated. It's pretty dang close. You can see here, if you push this down, this does need to shift over to the right. If you just started doing that and nailing this in place, this is definitely gonna crack apart. So we're gonna secure this, and then we're gonna pivot the thing onto the reveal line. And now that we've got that top miter secured, now it's time to push over onto the line, which brings me to the next mistake, and that is holding the gun the wrong way. And this can actually be very dangerous, so pay attention here. Now, because the way we're shooting this on the edge here, the chisel points go left and right. You want to hold your gun this way here. The chisel points of the nails are going to go up and down. They're not going to shoot out of the jamb, blow this apart, and potentially stick into your finger. So instead of this on the edge here, you're going to want to do this. When it comes to nailing over here, it doesn't really matter. And mistake number 8, this one is my personal pet peeve, using the wrong materials to fill your nail holes. If you're gonna use caulking here, we cannot be friends anymore. You're gonna make an absolute mess out of your trim work. You're gonna be able to see those shrunken up holes from a mile away. Drydex, not a great choice either. This is really soft and you're gonna be prone to over sanding, and you're gonna see the little divots from 3 or 4 feet. What I like to use here is white wood filler. This is gonna have a similar kind of hardness to the surrounding wood, and it's gonna sand up a lot better. So just take some of that white wood filler, put it onto your finger. You can use a putty knife, but you don't have to, and pop it into the hole. And then you want to make sure you mound up that wood filler a little bit. Don't get crazy so that you have too much sanding to do, but just mound it up. That way you can get away with one coat. Mistake number 9, cutting too much off the tip of your tube of caulking. Once you get that huge hole on there, you are always going to be making an enormous mess. Let me show you how to cut off the perfect amount every single time. Take a new tube. You need a utility knife here. Take that tube, tip it down onto the ground. You want to cut straight down. That's going to put the perfect angle on, and you want to cut off just a tiny little bit so that you end up with a hole in the end of your tube. You can always cut off more. You cannot grow the tip back. I didn't quite cut off enough there because you can't see the hole yet. We'll tip it back down and we'll just slice off a little piece of the pepperoni here. Now you can see that hole. That is the perfect amount there. Because this is so small, it's gonna be hard to tell where it's at. Take a black Sharpie, find the long point here, tilt it this way, put yourself a nice line on here. You're gonna be amazed at how much easier that makes it to keep this thing oriented in the right direction. If you've ever caulked before, you're gonna notice halfway through the tube, it's gonna get easier. The reason for that is you're gonna develop little ridges on the side of your tip. So what I like to do before I even start, I take some sandpaper, throw it into that 90 there, and then just sand some of those grooves on before you even get rolling. 3 or 4 swipes. Take that little fuzzy bit, just peel that off with your fingers. Throw the tube into a gun. and you're ready to go. Now check this out. You're gonna see how much easier this is actually gonna work. Moisten the finger. Boom. A lot easier than cutting too much off and making a huge mess. Now mistake number 10, we're almost there. Stick around for this one. It will save you a ton of time, and that's going to be caulking corners and making a huge mess. You do not want to take your tube and caulk towards a corner and try to turn. It's just going to build up too much in the corner. What you want to do is you want to start off with an ultra clean tip in the corner and work your way out in one direction. Clean the tip off, back in the corner. See, I have a little bit there. That's just gonna attach right onto the side there and make a mess. So make sure that thing is perfectly clean. Get into the corner, work your way out. And then you wanna just take your finger, moisten it down and smooth that over. If you're lucky, you can get one swipe. Chances are you might have to come back and work it a little bit more, a couple times. And yeah, that looks beautiful. And hey, if you want to see what type of caulking to use for your next project and which type of caulking should be illegal, go ahead and check out this video right over there.
In action mode and rolling.
We're going to glue these things together down on the floor. Glue! Did you hear that?